It's a wild world out there, but some worlds are even wilder. Hi, I'm Tyler Habney, and you're listening to Dungeons and Dystopias. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome back to Dungeons and Dystopias. I am your host, Tyler Habney. Today I'm a bit sick, so I might take things a little bit more slow today. It might also just be the weather. We've had some pretty rough weather, changing pretty frequently lately, so that has been messing with me. But anyway, today we are here to talk about a very special topic to a lot of D&D fans. Most people have at least heard of this place. Today we're going to be talking about the Underdark, which we brought up a few episodes ago with my buddy Jordan, who came through. We were talking about Dungeons & Dragons and stuff, and we brought up the Dwergar. And in that sort of segment for our Monster of the Week, we discussed a location called the Underdark, which we described as the essentially the Hollow Earth when we were talking about it. But I figured today we'd spend an episode just talking a bit more about it. So the Underdark is as we mentioned before, it is the Hollow Earth. It is essentially this own sort of land that exists beneath the regular Forgotten Realms. And it is almost 1-to-1 if you look at a map of Faerun and then compare it to a map of the Underdark. It's like the Underdark is an underground, rock-filled mirror to the Forgotten Realms. And it's also way more dangerous. But we'll get into that. So first things first, there are a couple of different layers to the Underdark that are kind of important to know. For one, there's the surface, the world above. That's Faerun, the Forgotten Realms, typically where a lot of D&D campaigns will take place, is just out there in the open world. Other than that, there are three actual layers to the Underdark. The Upper Dark, which is, once again, where most Underdark campaigns will take place. It's the least dangerous one, and yet it is still incredibly dangerous. It is about... the Upper Dark makes the first 3 or so miles vertically down into the ground. And then just below that, for the between 3 to 10 miles, is a location called the Middle Dark, which is where a lot of cities in the Underdark are located. So you might go from the Upper Dark into the Middle Dark to go to like the Drow city down there, Menzoberranzan. And finally, we have the Lower Dark, which is the spookiest, scariest place you can go. It is the furthest down below the surface of the earth that you could get. And it contains terrible, terrifying monsters like aboleths and other things. So generally, the Underdark is pretty dangerous, so to speak. But it's a place where a lot of different types of creatures live. Common creatures in the Underdark, one might expect to see is, of course, the Drow Elves, which are dark elves, basically. They are a culture that is matriarchal in nature. They are also pretty messed up. They're the god they worship, Lolth, or at least most of them. There are Seldarine Drow who worship a good aligned god and are nicer people, but the ones that worship Lolth are... pretty terrible people. They engage in slavery, backstabbing, lying, political fraud, pretty much anything to get a leg up on their competitors. Because the city of Menzoberranzan, which is the Drow capital city for the Lolth worshipping Drow, is a terrible place. Just god awful, really bad. Hate it. It's a mess in there, and if you're not a Drow elf, it's even messier. So generally, you'll see a lot of Drow Elf when you go down into the Underdark, because they are, I don't want to say some of the bigger inhabitants there, but they have quite a lot of presence. And Drow Elves naturally have sunlight sensitivity, so, I mean, the Underdark's perfect for them. Um, Next up, we have as I mentioned earlier, the aboleths. Aboleths are these crazy sort of Lovecraftian type monsters that dwell in underground lakes and rivers and ponds and stuff. They can communicate with you through your mind. They have just a bunch of sort of psionic abilities. They're pretty crazy. A lot of them are way older than you might give them credit, if that makes sense. It's they're one of those ancient being type monsters. So aboleths, just love being around the Underdark. Just love it. Other than that, we have, as we talked about a few episodes ago, and as I mentioned earlier, we were talking about the Dwergar, which are the deep dwarves or the rock dwarves. They have gray skin and also engage in slavery. That's not a requirement for being in the Underdark, but it does certainly help. So yeah, the Dwergar, if you want to hear more about them, I think it was the last Dungeons & Dragons episode I did, or maybe it was the one before that. But I talk a bit more about Dwergar and the capital city of Gracklstugh, which is a somewhat important Dwergar city in lore. Gracklstugh is this large Dwergar settlement where they trade a lot with other dwarves and stuff on the surface, but they also engage in slavery. Next one's fun. The Svrfneblin, or the Deep Gnomes, they're the exact same thing, but for gnomes. They're like Dwergar, but they're gnomes. And guess what? These ones don't engage in slavery. I know, crazy. We finally get an Underdark society that doesn't engage in the worst crime humanity can commit. Yeah, so the Svrfneblin are well, I mean, they're a pretty cool group of people. They're typically a bit more isolationist than the dark dwarves or the deep dwarves might be. Mostly just because a lot of people kind of go after the Svrfneblin, if that makes sense. They're targets of a lot of different things. And they have a huge city that's not too far away from Gracklstugh. That is, it's Blingdenstone. It's a city that is constructed to look like a city, but there's a hidden city. The actual city is hidden through in this sort of facade of a fake city. It's said that you can walk through Blingdenstone and not know a single person is living there, when there are hundreds of these gnomes that live within the homes and walls of Blingdenstone, just because there is this fake facade of a city that's sort of set up to, fool trespassers. Very cool city. Blingdenstone has a lot of stones, so to speak. It's a very beautiful looking city as well. If you ever look at any of the art of Blingdenstone online, it definitely does seem like a nice location for a D&D adventure. So other than that, the Underdark has plenty of other types of creatures around. There is, of course, the classic Kuo-toa. They're fish people, and they're very interesting because the Kuo-toa have a unique ability in which they can positively manifest their gods. So I don't know if you're very familiar with the concept of positive visualization, but the Kuo-toa master it. They all they have to do is believe in a god, and that god will exist, if that makes sense. So let's say I as an adventurer managed to convince a village of Kuo-toa that I am some holy deity being and that they should start worshiping me as a god. Well, if they start doing that, you now have whatever power they believe you to have. And I mean, Kuo-toa aren't exactly the smartest, so that might not be a ton of power, but it is still, it's still a boon And you still have an entire race of people or an entire village of people who are worshiping you as a god. And you're getting positive effects because of that, because the Kuo-toa have such active imaginations. They are a very cool group. They hang out in cities that have crazy names that are hard to pronounce, like Glop Gloop or something like that. I don't exactly have any off the top of my head, but it is 100% stuff like that. So those are the kind of the people that live around the Underdark. Or at least some of the, I guess, more civilized societies, because once you get out of all of those types of groups of people, you start running into just basically insane feral monsters that will rip you apart or kill you. And even then, a lot of those people before would rip you apart and kill you. Drow elves, 100%. They love doing that. That's their main pastime, is ripping people apart and killing them. Dwergar, yeah, probably also them. Svirfneblin, I'd say probably more out of self-defense than anything else. I'm not going to lie. Other than that, in the Underdark, you have Illithids, Beholders, Cloakers, all sorts of fun little things. Of course, dragons will hang out down there a lot, you know. So generally, very dangerous place to go, but some of the more fun campaigns do take place down there. There is one campaign made by Wizards of the Coast called Out of the Abyss, which tells us a lot about the Northdark, which is, it's an area near, it's not Neverwinter, it's Silvery Moon. And it's, there's this large underdark underground pond, or a lake, that exists there, and the whole campaign kind of takes place around that lake. And you see the cities of Blingdenstone, Gracklestug, and Menzoberranzan all kind of in that campaign. So it's pretty great. If you're interested in the Underdark, I definitely check that one out. It's a good read. I've read through it. I haven't ran Out of the Abyss, but I probably would. Yeah, so let's go back a bit and talk a bit about what kind of things you can find in the Underdark. There are a lot of flora in the Underdark, a lot of different types of spores, and a lot of these grow because of something called Ferzres, which is a sort of ambient atmospheric, I don't want to call it wild magic, but it is a sort of magic energy that exists throughout the Underdark. Ferzres is relatively important for a lot of things that go in the Underdark, because it does have differing effects on certain spells. If you are in a pocket of Ferzres. So it's important to keep note of that, and a lot of these the plants and fungi that live in the Underdark actually exist off of Ferzres. Like, they absorb it like it's photosynthesis. So they don't get sunlight, obviously. They don't get a lot of other nutrients, but they do get Ferzres, which makes them have crazy effects. Like one of them being Bibberbang. Bibberbangs are fungi that explode. That's what they do. They just explode. And I think that's pretty neat. There's Tongue of Madness, which I believe gives confusion. There's just so many different types of flora in the Underdark that I wish I could go over, but, personally, I think you should read Out of the Abyss or play Baldur's Gate 3, and you'll see a couple of them. So, other than that, the Underdark is a pretty spooky place. Would definitely recommend keeping an eye on entrances to the Underdark, because a lot of times, if you're playing, your game master will present you with an entrance to the Underdark, and if you do not go down in there, something will come out of it. And those are always rough times when things start to come out of the Underdark and try to invade the surface, because, well, typically they're Drow war parties or Dwergar slavers. And neither of those are fun. Not at all. So we try to avoid them. As for today, however, we are going to get into our monster of the week since it's Dungeons and Dragons. And today we are going to be talking about revenants. Revenants are an undead creature. They are essentially somebody who died, and they died really, really angry. I guess would be the best way to put it. They are vengeful spirits who are dedicated to revenge in every sort of, I don't want to say every sense of the word, but that's their entire purpose, is to hunt down whoever they want revenge on and essentially kill them. So a revenant is created when somebody dies and they have a lot of unfinished business, or maybe they are so angry that their spirit is vengeful. And then they raise, and basically a revenant always knows the location, or at least the general direction, of the person they're looking for. So they can always be moving in that direction. It's kind of like that one thing you've heard where it's like, would you get $1 billion, but you'd be immortal, but you'd have a snail following you for the rest of your life, and if the snail touched you, you died. It's like that. But it's not a snail. It's a full-grown man who has a normal walking pace. So it's more like you're being hunted by Freddy or Jason. So it's a rough one. They do have the capability of communication, and oftentimes, and I have done this before in a campaign where I played in, was a revenant actually teamed up with us so that they could get to the person that they're trying to kill. But of course, it wasn't so much of a discussion type alliance. It was just more of a circumstantial, barely communicated with each other, but we both had the same, desires, sort of thing. So, Revenant's pretty fun. When it comes to being a Revenant, they have a bunch of different abilities. For one, they live until they take out whoever they want revenge on. So they can be around for quite a while, depending on who their target is and how protected they are. Other than that, they have the ability to heal pretty quickly. So attacking a Revenant, you'd better be doing some pretty consistent damage and, taking it pretty seriously, or else you might be dealing with it for a while. They have the ability to paralyze people. They have a paralyzing glare, which is pretty spooky. And when they're attacking the person that they want revenge on, their attacks deal additional damage, because obviously, makes sense. So Revenants, generally pretty great, I'd say, thing to have in the campaign is maybe one of the enemies the party fought wasn't ready to die yet. So, they can come back and you can have sort of a round two, but they're a Revenant. And I have seen that done before in campaigns, and personally, I always think it's a fun time when an enemy you thought was dead is now back, but maybe they are dead, and things are even crazier. So that's kind of, what I would use a Revenant for. Also, in Dungeon of the Mad Mage, there is a Revenant there who you can ally with, which is where we allied with that Revenant before. And he's out looking for people, not the party, and you can help him with that. And I think that's pretty cool. I think it's a pretty cool little quest. So that is Revenants. One of my favorite undead in D&D, I'd say, just because they're very flexible. They can be used in a lot of different situations for a lot of different storylines and stuff. So, yeah, if you're looking to spice things up, I would suggest using a Revenant today. So that'll be it for us this week. Thank you so much for coming by and listening to this podcast. I don't know what we're going to be getting up to next week, but since I did just do a double on Cyberpunk, I figure I will do another D&D episode. So that's exciting. I'll see you next episode. This has been Dungeons and Dystopias. Thank you so much for listening.